Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Ann Arbor, Michigan. And happy Easter to those who celebrate Easter. It's such a joy to see the signs of life returning all around us right now. The crocuses pushing their way through the earth, the birds busily building nests, the hum of insects and frogs filling the air again, children playing in playgrounds. All these little signs of hope mean so much after another long, hard winter. Today, in honor of spring and Easter, we're going to be celebrating the themes of rebirth and possibility, including our first ever online child dedication. But first, we begin our time together by lighting the chalice. The chalice is a reminder of our connections to one another, to our living tradition, and to Unitarian Universalists all over the world. So I invite you to join me in spirit or by lighting your own chalice at home. Together, let us say, we light this chalice for the light of truth. We light this chalice for the warmth of love. We light this chalice for the energy of action. We light this chalice for the harmony of peace. Another way that we begin our time together each week is by saying our covenant together. As Unitarian Universalists, we are not bound together by one single belief, but by our covenant, the promises we make to one another about how we will be together. So whether this is your first time joining us, or whether you have these words memorized, please join me as we say, the spirit of this church is love, and service is its law. This is our covenant with each other, to dwell together in peace, to search for truth and love, and to help one another.
Of the earth and sky, come, kindred, lift your voices high. Alleluia, alleluia. Bright burning sun with golden beam, soft shining moon with silver gleam. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. Rushing wind so wild and strong, white clouds that sail in heaven along. Alleluia, alleluia. Fair rising morn in praise rejoice. High stars of evening find a voice. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. Day by day, bring forth your blessings on our way. Alleluia, alleluia. All herbs and fruits that richly grow, let them the glory also show. Alleluia, alleluia. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia.
The hymn invites us, kindred, to lift our voices high so that a melody might be conjured up to rhyme and resound with hope. And our own kindred in this community invite us to make a difference the world can hear. a difference now for growing hope. Ypsilanti, Michigan is home to so many organizations of people working to serve and amplify socially marginalized lives, to build up socially marginalized perspectives, to make real the sound of socially marginalized problems, to make real the effect of socially marginalized solutions. Today, we're giving voice to one of those bullhorns, one of those organizations making their difference and dreams heard. We're raising money for Growing Hope, and we can only do that if you'll help. Growing Hope is a nonprofit organization rooted in Ypsilanti, dedicated to the dream of an equitable and sustainable local food system. There is absolutely no lasting liberation to any person until all people can eat. Until no person is without the living benefits of food accessible to them, and to buy, to sell, to prepare, and to exchange food without barrier. Until this is possible, no liberation is possible. This is about economic power and social dignity, cultural preservation, cognitive prowess, and healthcare, even after it is about the right to get what you need literally to survive. In the last year, Growing Hope has transformed Ypsilanti Farmers Marketplace Hall into the Ypsi area online market. People are getting local produce in the last year online. Farmers are delivering produce to the marketplace. We're keeping homes well and farmers in business, and people safe, picking up those produce items in their car and those groceries. Their urban farm is growing thousands of vegetable seedlings to distribute to Ypsilanti home, community, and school gardeners. And during COVID-19, these seedlings have been instrumental in helping people start their own gardens, get outside when stuck at home, and reduce food costs. With garden workshops and youth field trips, teen leadership gardening programs, Ypsilanti is nourished and nourishing, and the wellness of its people cultivated in part by the community partnerships that Growing Hope helps make real every day. Intention can start to heal community. Intention can start to heal humanity. It will never finish the task. Lift your voice high, and you'll make some noise. Do it with artful intent, and you'll have sung a tune. Still, only in community, only until you have heard from the ones hearing you, will you know if you've made any music at all. Do something today you'll know, in hindsight, has nourished the web of creation of which you are a part. Let us do what it takes to nourish the people we all are, in all places, to give hope another reason to grow itself. Give today at UUAA.org/giving. A child dedication in our community is a holy event, an opportunity to recall the blessed happenstance across generations which has come to new birth, a moment to acknowledge the magnificent possibilities of love and of the human body itself, a chance to find hope and remember the wondering ones we once were, to learn again what we used to teach adults, how to let 3 floating bubbles delight you and change your day. Last weekend, on behalf of the community, Reverends Theresa, Cassie, and I spent some time with a few of our own, Marin and Luke, and their recent family arrival, Ezra Michael Llewellyn Wilson. We met to engage one of the great traditions of any faith, that tradition where the newest humans among us are offered a warm welcome. We practice the balance of this in the tender ceremonies when we bid our newest ancestors farewell. They work together to teach us wisdom in the ever-growing, ever-turning circle of creation and life. There is power, yes, in the independent welcome of our youngest to the world, and there is power in the love itself surrounding this moment on the courtyard of ours that must have been built for spring. Yet this ceremony harnesses yet another layer of meaning because it requires the entire circle of care, the family, the congregation, parents, to articulate that love into solid covenants for the benefit of the welfare of children. And to speak that covenant for the elements of the earth to be able to hear and themselves soak in. The ministers last weekend took the opportunity to speak blessings to this precious, wide-eyed explorer. We offered Ezra a touch of the soil, the water, the air, and the miracle flash of fire we knew as our own. As we learned also how our ritual is not quite built for a windy day. And we shared a bit of wisdom in each element of the earth that we saw. Ezra's godparents, Sarah and Tom, shared wisdom too, brought from their own craft, which all seemed to have been gingerly tucked into their hearts for safekeeping until this moment.
I love you, and it was the greatest honor for me to be asked to be part of your life.
I love you, Ezzy. Thank you for being.
Ezra's parents held and surrounded their child with care and brilliant smiles. The dedication's not complete, though, until you take your part in the blessing. This is the way the community works. This is the community's work. And so with joy, I invite you into this collection of manifold blessing. UUAA community, wherever you are, whenever you are watching this moment, dare to believe that it matters to all life the ways we acknowledge each child. Speak again with me these words which engage the congregation in the care of this child and remembers its accountability to the wellness of all children. Always. Ready? Together, let us say, we perform this ceremony to declare that all of us, as members and friends of First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Ann Arbor, are responsible for the well-being of the children among us. We promise to journey with you through all that life offers, in covenants of trust, gratitude, service, justice, compassion, and unfailing love. Welcome into our hearts. Welcome into this circle of love. So may the circle ever be warmed by our voices and our will to be one.
You have just been in the company of a child and witnessed their wonder at the world unfolding around them. I could see this wonder in Ezra's eyes and face and his entire tiny body when he encountered the earth, the fire, the water, the air. A mixture of delight and curiosity and maybe slight apprehension and joy, of experience unencumbered by too much thinking or too many words. That sense of wonder that we as grown-ups may have lost track of, covered up, or sadly felt was no longer necessary. Once we became beings with words, words that slowly over time tend to silence the wonder. We can take time now to cultivate that feeling again. In our time of silence together, let us find that sense of wonder. If you would join me and focus on the flame of a candle. This one will do, or if you have a flame lit at home, perhaps on your chalice, use that one, or conjure a flame in your imagination. Imagine connecting with the elements yourself. Where do they lead you? Let your mind follow the flame wherever it takes you. Let it lead you to places of whimsy and delight. Returning from the silence, take the time you need. And if you would join me in the spirit of prayer. May we have increasingly more moments of unencumbered wonder and delight, not tripped up by our words or our thinking brains. May we just feel the earth, the fire, the water, the air, and all the possibilities held within them and within ourselves. We pray that as the year ahead unfolds, we each are blessed with seeing and feeling and knowing that we have the potential to make the world a better place for all children. May each child that's born experience a world with enough food, clean water, a place to call home, opportunities to grow healthily and to learn safely, a world without violence and hate. May each child that's born know love as Ezra will grow to know it, from parents, godparents, chosen family, and from a community that promises to sing louder for hope, to work better for justice, to widen our capacity for love, to believe that peace is real, and to make it so. Amen.
What a beautiful thing it is to be together this weekend as we in Southwest Michigan experience the ever-deepening days of spring, as we celebrate and honor the presence of new life among us here in our community in Ann Arbor, and as the broader society world around us, those in the Christian tradition, honor the season of Easter. All of those indicators of life and possibility unfolding around us in the stream of life around us. It's a beautiful thing, particularly coming on the heels of what we knew would be a long and hard winter, one with losses and sacrifices, one with uncertainty. Finally, the season of new life is in front of us. Now, even as we knew that this day would come, and we did, we knew that it would, this season would come. Many of us have been reflecting for months now that as we get to the downhill slope of the pandemic, what is the life that will be emerging on the other side of that, on the other side of the pandemic? Many among us, many thoughtful leaders, many spiritual leaders, many thinkers, wise individuals, reflecting on the reality that it's not possible to simply go back to what we knew in January 2020. How could it be so? We have had a shared collective experience that in many levels has tested our emotional, psychological, spiritual fortitude. We have faced sacrifices and losses, deaths of importance to us. Our lives have been impacted and for many of us profoundly changed. There's no simple going back to what previously was. We are instead moving forward into a new life that has yet to be experienced, one that will be in continuity with what was, and yet will build on this deep, long winter that we have shared. I'm reminded of how that which is new, that which is beautiful, is built on the foundations of all that has preceded. Many of you know Mark Nepo is my perhaps favorite poet, and Mark recently shared with me an unpublished piece of his that I presume will be in an upcoming book. I want to share this with you. It draws on the imagery of that which is beautiful. He uses the language of a temple, that which is beautiful, that we could call sacred, and the temple built on pillars over water. This piece is called Under the Temple. The temple hanging over the water is anchored on pillars that nameless workers placed in the mud long ago. So never forget that the mud and the hands of those workers are part of the temple too. What frames the sacred is just as sacred. The dirt that packs the plant is the beginning of beauty. And those who haul the piano on the stage are the beginning of music. And those who are stuck, though they dream of soaring, are the ancestors of our wings. That which we come to appreciate as beautiful exists in continuity with what has been, and in fact is built upon what has been. It doesn't appear out of nothing. Such a beautiful, beautiful piece by Mark Nepo. In that spirit, I have been reflecting on as we are moving into this season of rebirth. I would call it a rebirth, new birth, evolution, life post-pandemic. What are some, not necessarily all, but some of the ideas that could critically, beautifully, necessarily, out of necessity, ground us in that new emerging life? I have a few thoughts that I'd like to share with you today on this beautiful spring day in the midst of this season of Easter. First, zero-sum thinking has been literally killing us as a species. Zero-sum thinking, which permeates subconsciously just under the surface, not always in our conscious awareness, yet impacting our interpretations of situations and circumstances that we are in the midst of. Zero-sum thinking, the prevalence of it, is actually bringing us down as a species, creating harm among one another in our midst. Canadian psychologist Professor Daniel Megan has written extensively about this, and he notes, he calls it the zero-sum bias, that this form of thinking is actually a cognitive bias that is developed for specific historical reasons. If you think back to the days in which we were cave people, competing, fighting for limited resources, food, whatever it might be, land, etc. It developed as a heuristic, a shortcut, a mental shortcut that served us well in earlier times of existence, and yet continues in its prevalence, occurring subconsciously in situations where there is not a limited pie that needs to be divided. So this is what Professor Megan writes about quite extensively. This zero-sum bias continues now at the current state of existence that we human beings enjoy. One could say the United States, one of the wealthiest nations that has ever existed in the history of in the history of the planet. Zero-sum thinking, despite all that wealth, all the comfort, continues to subconsciously permeate our thinking. He gives, in one of his articles and essays, he gives a very day-to-day practical example of this. He talks about his own family and the kids that are in it. And he says, if he has a dozen apples sitting in a basket on a counter, he may take one for the kids and start to divide it up. And then the kids are immediately analyzing who got a bigger slice of the apple, and they'll complain about it and want equal slices, even though he knows one kid likes apples more than the other and may have a little bit more, the other's going to have a little bit less. They arrive instinctively at this conclusion and analysis that the distribution of a resource, the apple, must be fair and equal because it's a limited resource, ignoring the fact that there's a basket with 11 additional apples sitting right there. They could have unlimited apples as much as they want. We bring this into situations where there is unlimited capability and possibility all the time. We bring this heuristic subconsciously into all kinds of situations where it need not exist. Our ability to feel compassion and caring for one another is not a limited resource. The ability of our hearts to feel love for other people is not a limited, finite resource. There are many situations in which we can view circumstances, problems, dynamics that we are trying to navigate as win-win, as opposed to win-lose. And this is one of the areas of Professor Megan's work, is that when we wind up viewing one another consciously or subconsciously as competitors, we can't help but fall into paradigms of dominion over, power over, inequality. All of that rooted in conscious or subconscious commitments to a limited pie that must somehow be divided up. This has created no small part of the conflict and struggle that we are constantly navigating as a global community of human beings, and even just within our society as the United States. My challenge, one of my ideas in whatever this new life is that is emerging, is that rather than holding win-lose as the subconscious default, when we are encountering situations, problems that need navigating, can we challenge ourselves instead of defaulting to win-lose? Can we default to win-win and give that a shot? And win-win doesn't mean 100% of getting exactly what somebody wants, or I want, or you want, or what anybody wants. Win-win can be getting some of what one needs, maybe not every piece of it. How do we craft win-win so that other people can see themselves in the solution? They're getting something that feels helpful and good to them. So is somebody else. So is somebody else. And we're doing this for the general good so that we as a species can thrive. Instead of, I'm going to get to point number 2, viewing one another as competitors, which inevitably slips into viewing one another as enemies. The prevalence of a subconscious commitment to win-lose thinking fuels an inevitable outcome. We don't stop as human beings at considering one another as simply competitors. In the win-lose framework, we go to us, some who are like us, and them. Most others wind up being them. And the people that we classify as other, as them, are not just competitor because it can't stay at only competition. As soon as power, authority, financial resources become involved with the otherizing, it becomes power over, authority over, financial resources over, and that inequality fuels a difference in how people experience their humanity. That difference creates resentment, and the resentment can only translate into hostility. We wind up in a place where people view one another as enemies. This is fueled and supported by win-lose thinking, but not only win-lose thinking. One of my teachers, Meg Wheatley, teacher in the Shambhala Buddhist tradition, she says, we human beings are constantly seeing the world through our likes and dislikes, our judgments and opinions. Judgments are inherently satisfying. They are the preeminent filter that all human beings have in place. From the place of our likes and dislikes, our personal judgments and opinions, supported and intersecting with a win-lose paradigm in which we assume subconsciously, not always consciously, that the situations we're encountering involve the divvying up of a limited pie. We view other human beings, other siblings in our species, as a them, as an it, as an other. Shifting. The first challenge, the first idea that I will try to hold in my own being. Can we default approach problems and situations as inherently win-win instead of win-lose? 2, instead of viewing one another as competitors, competing over the limited pie, or worse, as other, or as enemy, can we view one another as beloved? This is no small challenge. This is no small concept to step into. Our U.S. society today, this viewing of one another as an enemy that must be out-organized, out-strategized, kept at bay. Those tactics, for they are tactics, don't actually create deeper understanding. They simply reinforce the existing premise that people who think, move, or have different needs than us that are our enemy. The strategy and tactics of out-organizing keep that mentality in place, that our siblings in the human species are our enemy, who must be managed and kept at bay. I want to share with you the words of the poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Henry Longfellow writes, "If we could read the secret history of those we'd like to punish, of those we'd like to define as our enemy, we would find a history of suffering to disarm all hostility." That's profound. Also, in my experience, it bears truth. If we could read the secret history of those we like to punish, classify, define as our enemy, we would find a history of suffering that would disarm all hostile intent. Rather than jumping to judgments and opinions, a natural human instinct, can we remind ourselves in thinking about our sibling human beings, our siblings in community, our siblings within our nation, our siblings globally, can we remind ourselves of the word beloved? That we are siblings of the same species that are having different experiences, and because of those experiences, different needs. Can we remind ourselves that we are beloved and should strive to be beloved to one another? My third idea, one that I hope that will help define the rebirth that we're moving into. This pandemic time, which has imposed a narrowness on us, a narrowing in on immediate circles of friends or neighbors or family. We have colloquially in this time referred to them as pods, the people that we might put our health at risk at in order to carefully be with. The risk of relationship, the taking care of relationship, the realizing how precious and essential, how necessary our relationships with one another are, and not just one with another as human beings, our relationships on the planet, our relationships with our backyard, the grass and the trees and the plants, our relationships with our local parks and streams and rivers and lakes, the land of which we are humbly moving around and with during our brief time here on this planet, the interconnectedness of it all. In Lakota spirituality, indigenous spirituality, in Lakota spirituality, the word mitakuyasin captures this. The word mitakuyasin meaning all my relations are relationships with one another's, with the animals, with all living life, and that which we tend to classify as non-living as well, the earth, the rocks, all of it. All of our relationships, all of our interdependent connection. We have been narrowly funneled, even forced to tend to and notice these connections in this pandemic time. Can we move from a time of imposed focus on these things to cherishing them, to cherishing the simple connection and the beauty and the necessity of it, of our relationships with one another, our relationships with the planet of which we're a part of, its animals, its plants, its rocks, all of it. Can we continue to nurture all that connectedness, even as we move toward a time where limitless activity, distraction, possibility will resume? For it will. We are moving back in that direction. And yet my prayer for all of us will be that we continue to cherish and hold as precious our interdependence and connection. It is the reminder from which we can move from the tendency to otherize one another, view one another as competitor, as enemy, to viewing one another as beloved, from viewing situations in a default as win-lose, to begin presuming and holding a different default of win-win. I will always look for a win-win. How can I craft, find, and help other people step into a win-win? It is this cherishing of the interdependence, of the beauty and necessity of it, that will fuel that will fuel the other two. In this season of Easter, in this season of spring, may we move boldly, courageously, clearly toward and into the rebirth that our world needs. We are those seeds. May it be so.
Rise, rise, rise. In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we ride here and we rise. Humbly hearted rise. We won't be divided. Rise. The Spirit to guide us. Rise. In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we ride here. In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we ride here and we rise. All of the children arise. Elders with wisdom rise. Ancestors surround us. In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we ride here. In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we ride here. We rise up from the wreckage, rise, and with courage, rise, fighting for life, rise, we rise, humbly hearted, rise, but we won't be divided, rise, with Spirit to guide us, rise,
Our time together is coming to a close now, but we invite you to continue connecting by joining us for Social Hour at uuaa.org/social hour. This is a great way to get to know each other more deeply through guided, small group conversations. If you're new to our community and you want to learn more about us, you can also let the Social Hour host know so they can invite you to a special breakout room for newcomers. As Reverend Manish said, this has been a long, hard winter, but now we are building something new together. We are building that sacred temple in the water. A community where we exercise power with rather than power over. A community where we honor each other's humanity and find win-win solutions. A community where we are committed to an audacious vision of working on climate justice, anti-racism and anti-oppression work, and creating a culture of radical welcome. All of this is only possible because of all of the gifts that each of us brings. Gifts of time, energy, money, talent, and presence. In the weeks ahead, may all the signs of beauty and hope that we see around us remind us of all the beauty and hope that lies within us. Amen, and blessed be.